Hello, this is David Bernstein, founder of the Jewish Institute for Liberal Values, and this is the Jewish Contrarians podcast. I'm here with my usual partner in thought crime, Brandy Shafutinsky. Hi, Brandy.
Hey, David.
And we're here to sort of talk about some of the issues of the day. We're going to have a special guest. We're going to do a bit of a dialogue here, but we're going to have a special guest, Christina Buttons, who we work with in doing social media. She's also quite an accomplished author, writer, thinker herself, but she's really helping us come to the to a new era in our use of social media, so that we can not only have great ideas but get those ideas out in public. Um, and so but Brandy and I wanted to spend a little time together talking about sort of the state of play. And there's been, it seems to constantly escalate. And Brandy, I know, you're sort of our in-house monitor. And when it comes to anti-Israelism, I mean, you follow it really closely. What are you seeing out there in terms of the protest movements and the like?
I see them getting more desperate and more volatile. I think that the way that they're trying to protest war that's happening thousands of miles away by doing things like blocking bridges or blocking airports is indicative that people really aren't listening to the message they're trying to spread. So they're getting more desperate in their tactics. But I'm also seeing that a lot of leadership is shying away from really doing what needs to be done to make sure that people's day-to-day lives aren't disrupted.
Yeah, so and it's interesting. The marketing part of my brain looks at these protests, sees people trying to disrupt Christmas, sees them trying to stop air traffic at JFK and some of the other outrageous antics, and says, "With enemies like that, who needs friends?" In other words, if we have people who are willing to sort of shut down Christmas, I mean, how can you have worse PR than that? But then I remember back to the Olympics, when in Munich Olympics, when 11 Israeli athletes were murdered. And one could easily say, how could that possibly be good PR? But I remember there was a documentary film made and it was shown at the French embassy. And it looked like that was the beginning of a mass marketing campaign that put the Palestinian issue on the map. And so while part of me says that's terrible PR, another part of me remembers that terrorism can work, and that's why it's done. Mm-hmm. And outrageous protests can work, and that's why they're done, even if it doesn't seem to add up to our sort of American marketing mind. So I don't know. Do you have a thought on that? I mean, are they winning when they do that?
Maybe they're not winning people over their side who actually have a little bit of foundational knowledge to the way the world works. But the concern is that they're winning over younger generations of people who aren't so grounded in reality and facts. And I think we're seeing that perhaps being one of the reasons why they're targeting the members of society that are overall ignorant to different ideas and facts on the ground and history.
Yeah. Yeah, they're taking full advantage of sort of what we call the Red-Green Alliance, this alliance between progressivism and radical Islam, by understanding that there are a lot of young people who have sort of bought into this bifurcated oppressed versus oppressor narrative, and will slot anything in, and they don't need elaborate arguments in order to get their point across. And I think they've done probably a lot of damage in that way from our perspective.
I think that's part of it, but the part that's more concerning to me isn't people that buy into the oppressor versus oppressed binary, even though I think it's simplistic thinking. It's that it's flipped. So the idea of who actually is the oppressor and who actually make up the oppressed is flipped in the situation regarding Israel, where people who have, if you want to talk, in terms of decolonization, a movement that has decolonized indigenous land for an indigenous people, Zionism, is falsely labeled settler colonialism. And the people who are descended from the original, settler colonialists are called the indigenous people. So when we get to the point of, even if the ideas of decolonization and oppressor versus oppressed are ridiculous, and even if they're harmful and damaging, I think what's even more damaging is that the truth doesn't matter.
Yeah. Years ago, I was executive director of an organization, Shalom, called the David Project. And it was based on the proposition that at one point, Israel was viewed as the David of the David and Goliath, had been perceived more recently as the Goliath and had to reclaim the David. So the David Project was about reclaiming the moral high ground of David. Although I have to say, you could argue that that was 15 years ago, that we haven't made much headway in that, and that the narrative itself that slots in the Palestinian cause or even Hamas has staying power and has even gained ground. So I agree, it's an inversion, but it's been a very effective one. I want to, we're going to bring in Christina in a second, but I don't want to lose the opportunity to sort of comment on Claudine Gay and Harvard and what happened there. Any thoughts?
I think we're actually seeing a similar ideology where a woman who grew up relatively privileged took advantage of that privilege and earned herself, was put into positions of power, and then used that power to crush people who dissented with her and her ideology, including people who grew up underprivileged. And she stole the works of people who didn't grow up with her level of access and claimed it as her own. And again, where facts don't matter, instead of the conversation of, set aside the congressional hearings, but the conversations of academic and scholarly integrity, there are conversations brought in that she's, claiming that she's being targeted simply because of her race, ignoring the fact that some of the people whose work she stole share the same race as her.
Yeah. Yeah. We're familiar with the case of Roland Fryer, who was a brilliant young black economist who's done cutting edge work and work that went against the grain of sort of the DEI narrative and was persecuted because of it. Really, I mean, there were some texts, inappropriate texts, but nothing that would ever get you either fired or removed, or and his lab was ultimately taken away from him. And what a deprivation, not just for him, but for all of us who were benefited from his research. Just my 2 cents here. This is really not about her. I mean, I don't really care that much about Claudine Gay and her plagiarism. I mean, I think, she's a plagiarist. She shouldn't be in that position. But what I'm hoping for is a what's next. And the what's next has to be the heads of the Harvard Corporation resigning. The what's next has to be an internal reflection on where the university is and where it should be going. The what's next is asking themselves, how can we restore liberal principles? There was a brilliant African-American woman, Harvard political theorist. I'm just blanking on her name. She came out with a piece in the Washington Post talking about how she had spent time doing DEI. There was a specialized DEI task force in 2018. And they had high hopes for it. And they were going to implement an entirely different version of DEI that was forward-looking, that was pluralistic, that emphasized viewpoint diversity as much as religious diversity. And by the way, interesting, I just learned that she was a competitive candidate with Claudine Gay for that job. And I've heard her talk, by the way, and she's extremely impressive and a genuine thought leader. Not only didn't she get the job at Harvard, but that version of DEI got completely set aside by the Ibram X. Kendi, Robin DiAngelo version of it. So I think that there are people at Harvard that could step in and take the organization, take the company, take the corporation or the school to the next level to restore some of its liberal principles. I mean, look, that's an uphill climb. Let's be honest. I mean, you got a lot of entrenched faculty who are not going to want to see that go in that direction. But there's a lot of other faculty, maybe it's even more than 50%, I guarantee you, who don't want to see the university captured by an ideology, don't want to have to read from the script anymore. And I think they would welcome a different approach. So That's what I hope happens what needs to happen for this to be any of this worth it. And thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would just hope that they would get back to scholarship in some form. If the
Yeah.
woman you're mentioning who wrote the article in the Washington Post is the same person that I'm thinking of, her resume for that position was so much heavier than
Yes.
Claudia's, her research resume. And just looking at these two candidates for the position of president, Harvard's president, you would think that they would consider the person that actually has more scholarship, and her scholarship has more rigor over
Right.
someone who's lacking that. And instead, the university decided to go with ideology.
Yeah.
And um, and I think that that's more concerning to me, or what I'm looking for to see if they're actually going to get back to what actually constitutes scholarship.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wait and see. All right. So I'd love to bring on Christina to this conversation. Christina Buttons. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Christina is one of the new members of our team. She's very, very creative artist, social media person, but also a writer and thinker who I've admired for a long time. I've read a lot of what she's written. She's been around. I mean, Christina, tell us a little bit about your background, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I kind of got involved in politics in 2020. I'm describe myself as like a former social justice warrior. I I grew up in California, so I basically voted Democrat in every election, but I never really paid that much attention to politics until 2020, when I was sort of locked in to my apartment in Los Angeles when everything was shut down during the pandemic. And my sort of introduction was through like the social justice art community on Instagram, which I like to say kind of led me into like a harder brand of progressive activism that was very like anti-Trump, anti-Republican. Republicans just want to kill us all because they won't wear masks, that kind of thing. Um, and I really believed, like, at the same time we were experiencing the COVID pandemic, we were also experiencing a racism pandemic. And I just totally, I mean, I think like all of the news sources, I just sort of just trusted implicitly on this topic. All the social justice activists I trusted. And then, I started working for this progressive Instagram page with like 750,000 followers and curating content for them. And it was somebody that I was working alongside with that accused me of racism. And he's a known like race baiter. You guys might remember him as the guy who got a woman fired from her job after this incident at a dog park. She's like been known as like the dog park racist, just for sort of saying some aggravated comments to him about like going back to his hood or something. Anyway, his name's Fred Joseph. But anyway, he actually called me a racist once, and then made a video about it. And I sort of brought this to the attention of the owners of the account. Like, you guys, hired me to write jokes. The incident in question was like I had written a joke about Candace Owens, and he said that I wasn't allowed to make jokes at the expense of Black people because I'm white, even though I was sort of hired to write this kind of material about Republicans for this page. When I brought it to the attention of the owners, they said, well, we'll let a Black person decide what's racist. And so you're a racist. And I'm like, that was kind of, I guess, my red pill moment, I guess you could say. And I was just very confused for several months until I finally found sort of like the heterodox voices like John McWhorter and Coleman Hughes and others like that. And I finally kind of found my home base as a politically homeless classical liberal. And I've been writing about sort of the ideology behind modern social justice ever since. And that's why I sort of have been very interested in what's going on with modern left-wing anti-Semitism and of course like the trans issues. I've write a lot extensively about, and that's how I got here.
Well, we're really happy to have you. You're super creative, super interesting, and we already feel the difference. And we can only imagine what months and months and months of that will bring. So thank you. You should all check us out on Twitter at JALVORG. Find us on Facebook, Instagram. I don't know, anywhere else. I think that more or less covers it. Um, so, Christina, one of the things that you did after, first of all, I was watching, everybody after October 7th. What are all my friends saying about this? And you were one of the people who came out really strongly appalled with not just what Hamas had done, but how the American left was reacting to it. And that was sort of a moment for a lot of us. And it was, and then you really were putting out a lot of social media about it. And I was really struck by that. And then you did some research that was published in Quillette magazine on Hamas and Instagram. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were seeing and what you've seen since then?
Yeah. So after October 7th happened, I've on social media, on Instagram, I almost saw like a repeat of what I saw in 2020, that sort of the social media campaign that launched all of the Black Lives Matter riots and protests and things like that in 2020. The same type of thing, casting Jewish people this time as oppressors, and Palestinians now as the helpless victims. And that kind of just went into action. I have a lot of friends who are Jewish, and I've reached out to them, and what they were experiencing was just really difficult. Seeing, a lot of left-leaning people, a lot of left-leaning Jewish people now feel very like politically homeless, and they were telling me they were buying guns and upping their security system. It was a very like scary time, and I felt that, and I wanted to help do something about it and take what I know already from, reading and writing so much about critical social justice, critical theory, postmodernism, the kind of like ideological rot that's going on in the universities, and sort of broadcast that to a wider audience and put it in context of what's going on with the Jewish community right now.
Yeah. So what were you seeing on social media at that time, and what have you seen since on social media and on Instagram in particular? What was your, tell us a little bit more about your Quillette piece, and if you want to share any slides,
Yeah.
we put those up as well. But narrate them so the people who aren't watching will know what they are.
Oh, here we go. Does this work?
We see it.
Okay, so I wrote an article for Quillette. It's called Hamas Cheerleaders Are All Over Instagram. And it's about the sort of very well-funded anti-Israel propaganda pages that specifically target American progressives on Instagram with social justice themed content. This is my first article on Quillette, is about sort of what I just described as being a social justice meme maker. And what I saw, following October 7th was just sort of like an explosion of the kind of content that we saw like in 2020. This is sort of a collage I made of some of the really popular Instagram posts that let me see.
Are there any in particular you want to call out? I mean, what were some of the trends you were seeing in some of these posts?
So these are a type of post you saw commonly on Instagram in 2020 that there's slideshows. They're sort of instructive on like they introduce people to modern social justice ideology that comes from critical theory, critical race theory, and that sort of thing.
Christina,
yeah.
Were these mostly accounts from individuals or organizations?
They're mostly individuals who became activists. This was kind of how I got introduced to social justice, because there was also, they pressured people to share them too. If you see some of them say silence is violence, and staying silent in times of injustice is privilege. There was a lot of social pressure to share these posts and spread this ideology, and that's how it just sort of, it was everywhere. And then it taught people, there were slideshows, so they taught people what to say exactly verbatim, and you would see it all the time in comments. So if someone brings up a counterpoint, they knew exactly what to say to shut them down, and they could just,
So just like a library of social justice talking points.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it. At best, a white person can be an anti-racist racist.
That's the belief that all white people are racist no matter what, because they possess power over everybody else.
Right.
Anyway, so after October 7th, I started seeing, the same type of social justice posts all over Instagram with, slideshows of how to talk about these things in a very simple way, just very bullet pointed, giving people talking points, telling, and you can see I have the amount of likes per post, and they're very, very popular. Some of these posts are from, you might know, Jewish Voice for Peace, a lot of anti-Israel pages.
Right.
And they also introduced,
I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, in the comments on either the ones from 2020 or these more recent ones, in the comments, did you see any pushback from anyone?
I mean, I tried, and there are a lot of Jewish people who are trying, but a lot of these posts, they tell people exactly what to say in response, and they've been organizing for years. They've been preparing. So I will get into that in a second, but you can see how popular these posts are there.
Yeah. Anti-Zionist vibes only. I was looking at a couple. Can you go back one? Because I just want to read a few of them. Palestine liberation is reproductive justice. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah. They try to sort of, take other social justice causes that other people are familiar with or maybe care about, and they say well, this is a Palestine issue too. So that's why you talk about Palestine type of thing.
Yep.
Well, you guys know the Harris poll. Every time they come out with a new Harris poll every month, the support for Hamas seems to be growing. There was a December poll as well. This is from October and November, which I included in my article just to sort of show that the 18 to 24 crowd is very pro-Hamas when given the option between the two, between Israel and Hamas.
And that's probably because of Instagram and TikTok, you think, or is it because they're also in college campuses disproportionately and getting their ideological talking points there?
I think it's a lot of students who are taking, post-colonial studies at college. They have Instagram accounts. They take what they learned, they turn it into infographics. If you have some basic design skills, like they can be very persuasive. You can see, I'll show a few examples.
Yeah.
It's
What
just,
what is settler colonialism? Gaza, yep, standing with Palestine, which is the fist with a Palestinian flag. The 10 stages of genocide.
Israeli apartheid for beginners.
Yeah, it looks like one of those like something like computers for dummies books that you see
Yeah.
at the Barnes and
that's what
Noble.
they are. They're just, yeah, it's Palestine for dummies, but from the anti-Israel perspective. Yeah,
Yep.
for beginners. And they oversimplify everything. They leave out context and history and facts, and it's all from sort of like a pseudo-historical perspective, which is what post-colonial studies and Palestine studies is really. It's critical theory with a pseudo-historical twist.
Yep.
That's a good way to put it.
There's another one. These ones are a little bit more explicitly pro.
Yeah, there's a flag. It looks like an Israeli flag with a swastika inside the Star of David. Not very subtle.
Yeah.
This is sort of really explicit Hamas propaganda.
Yeah.
Less.
There's a lot of that too.
What's that?
There's a lot of it online.
Yeah.
A lot of it on Instagram, where they're sort of portrayed as heroes.
Long live the resistance, and so forth.
In seeing all of this stuff, I know what I saw on Instagram. I'm wondering if you saw a similar trend where people were posting more like slightly anti-Israel stuff. Did it kind of morph into just blatant support of Hamas, or were these kind of out at the same time?
I think it's always been there. There are some specific accounts that are extremely influential, and they just sort of they don't usually talk about Hamas so explicitly. They just sort of call them like Palestinian resistance and Palestinian militants and just other words to sort of distance themselves from Hamas specifically, because they're designated as a terrorist organization.
I mean, the picture of the Hamas terrorists saying "Long live the resistance" with wearing terrorist uniforms, kind of explicit. But
yeah, but see, they call it the resistance, and they don't actually call them Hamas. So people to sort of disassociate with the name.
So, what are your conclusions about this? Do you have some? I mean, we could go through this more, and I'd like to actually. I'm thinking about doing a longer live stream event where you sort of, or recorded session where you go into this in more depth. But do you think that are we just losing because they have numbers on their side? I mean, there are 15 million Jews in the world and well over 1 billion Muslims, and not that all of us agree or all of them agree, but enough of them agree that that we're just losing. Or is it that they're just the anti-Israel establishment, to the degree there is such an establishment, maybe there isn't, is more creative and smarter than we are? What are you looking at?
They've been planning this for several years. They saw how successful Black Lives Matter protests and whatnot and support for that launched in 2020. They copied their tactics. They have a lot of money from progressive donors, and
do you think that it's that they're using the existing progressive infrastructure to get their message out, or do you think that
that's a slide. I was going to get to that, but because this is one of the accounts that I found. They're actually, I just checked, they're at 800,000 followers now. It's a California-based nonprofit called the Institute for Middle East Understanding, and it says, on their mission statement, their purpose is to influence American opinions. So like they've had like years to plan this, and when October 7th happened, they knew they were prepared. They knew exactly what to do. They gained hundreds of thousands of followers since October 7th. And they're willing to lie. They're willing to just outright mislead people. And there's no fact checking on Instagram. And what I did is I found on, oh, here's some of their financials. They have a lot of wealthy donors like the Rockefeller Brothers Fund.
Yeah, they've been a really big problem.
Yeah. And of course, you probably know that John D. Rockefeller Jr. was the primary financier for Nazi eugenics research. So that's relative there. And they've gained, there's sometimes like on some days they've gained like 20,000, 25,000 followers from their highly misleading posts. If you see the one on the right that says Israel deliberately bombs hospitals, no mention whatsoever that Hamas hides in hospitals. They don't care about being honest. They just care about winning over public opinion. That's their whole purpose.
Sure.
These are some of their
to be fair, we've seen some mainstream media sources do the same.
Yeah, that are looking for clicks and advertising. But if you don't have to, at least they have to pretend to want to preserve their credibility. I think these are people who just don't even need to bother.
Some of them, I mean.
Yeah, these people don't care at all. They're only about changing public opinion in the Palestinian perspective. So what I found an actual YouTube session, a panel that talks about how to reach Americans. And it was this account, the Institute for Middle East Understanding. It was another account, Let's Talk Palestine, and then another Palestine Studies. And they all, shared how they have switched to social media because so that they can control the narrative. It's easier because they say that, mainstream media reporting, they try to stay balanced and they care about fact checking and things like that. So they go directly to social media to reach people. And it actually, it says social justice content. So they've figured out that social justice content works, and then that's how they've managed to influence so many young people. I don't know if you want to actually get into. I have some like short video clips that I took from it, but I can.
Why don't we save those and let's
Okay.
use this as a preview for a longer session, because I think we should really go through all of this and make it available to our viewers and listeners and just have them get a taste of this. So, it just goes it just goes to the challenge of where do we, the Jewish community, the non-Jewish community who care about Israel, care about truth, where do we invest? Do we continue to say, okay, our universities are structurally predisposed to hostility toward Jews in Israel and ideology, so therefore we've got to turn them around, which is a long-term proposition for sure? Do we say, well, even if we start to change that, we're still stuck with Instagram and social media channels like TikTok that seem predisposed to be hostile as well, and we're just stuck in this pattern where we're losing young people? I mean, is there a way around it?
Well, I have noticed since October 7th, I think a lot of, pro-Israel accounts have emerged and stepped up and realized like we need to target Instagram and TikTok with content that shows the other point of view, because they're only getting one perspective. And I think it's helping. I mean, that's also why I wanted to be a part of JILV too, is because it's people just aren't getting the other side of the story, and you need both. I mean, to understand what's really going on, and that it's a lot more complicated than just, apartheid and occupation and all of the other buzzwords they like to throw around. But
Yeah.
I am noticing, more balance lately.
So maybe we're starting to get our act together, and we're getting better, and we have maybe more and more people on their own are taking matters into their own hands. I have a friend of mine who is a TikTok influencer, and her TikTok posts, I don't know, are they called posts? They might not be called posts. I'm not that often on TikTok, although I do now and again go and watch videos. But we're on the issue of disabilities, and she gained a very large following, over 100,000 viewers, and she was immediately start to pivot toward Jewish and Israel content right after October 7th. So I'm sure she was caught flat-footed. She wasn't really that busy trying to make the case for Israel on her disabilities-oriented TikTok page, but as soon as things changed, she did too. So I imagine there's more people like her.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's like it's an emergency. Like it's bad. People are just being badly misinformed about the situation there.
Yeah.
And
Well, we're gonna have to look at it, and and one of the things, and I think maybe what we'll do over time, maybe you'll also help us understand, in our larger community, to understand how to do social media better. Maybe we can have a tutorial from you on that. I mean, I've already learned a tremendous amount in just a couple of weeks from you on how to be more effective on social media, and just watching what you do and how you do it. So I think we all have to learn more about being effective. So thank you for that.
you guys
And
have so many great materials on the website that, I mean, it'll take me some time, but like there's so much great material to work with that, can we sort of translate it into various types of social media posts?
Yep. Yeah, it's easy for somebody like us. We write these 700 word, 1,000 word, 5,000 word essays or whatever. And as soon as we're done with the 700 words and it's out there and it either gets a lot of eyeballs or it doesn't, we're moving on to the next 700 words. And we don't always take the time to say, okay, how do we make this into bite-sized posts that people can really understand and digest, and so forth. So that's why we need somebody with your special insights and skills. So, all right. Well, thank you both. I'm glad we sort of delved into this, and we're going to go into it at a deeper level very shortly. We'll keep you posted. And thank you, Christina, for joining us and for being part of our team. We really love having you. And as always, Brandy, thanks for the work you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Be well, guys.